Hello everyone, welcome to my Cosmic Spider-Man build breakdown. I have been super excited to show you guys this build. But before people skip my intro dialogue and go straight to the build, I beg you to give the intro a listen so I can have a full chance to explain everything properly. I gave everyone a little teaser of what I was working on in my work in progress build video, and I am now happy to show you guys the finished products. I am sorry about the wait, but these build videos can take me a long time to make, so anyone liking and subscribing is super appreciated. Now let's jump into it. This build is actually simpler than people would expect, and 3 of the 4 pieces are actually pretty simple and straightforward to get. I have purposefully made this build pretty simple so that everyone can make it, so all us Spider-Man mains can stop getting carried in boss fights and start doing the carrying. I also have kept it at a power level everyone can achieve right now without using any exploits. While there is 2 pieces of 150 gear in here, you could knock those down to whatever and it would still work just the same. This build still balances out with the pieces that are still 140, so our overall power level is still 154 something. Anyone who plays the game for a couple of weeks can achieve pretty easy. So, anyone thinking this is only possible because of the 2 150 gear pieces can just leave this video now, as that just simply is not true. Just take a look at these stats, they are nothing special and something everyone can get pretty easy. This build is only the start and a taste of Spider-Man's damage output. Once I start to show you guys the higher power level version of this, you will see how powerful he really is. Once we actually hit 160 or 175, the damage is going to get even crazier, so stay tuned for when I get this build there, as 32 seconds is just the starting time for an OLT solo. Everyone better get ready, as it's only going to get better, and Spider could end up being one of the best options for bosses with this build. So, for our slot 1 we are using this raid piece. I know some people don't want to play the raid, and if you want to make a version of this build you don't have to. The only things important on this slot is the precision and valor stats and the melee power attack Steel Sonic. The lethal conduit and webbing perk are totally useless, so this slot could get even better. I personally think the melee power attacks are the best way to apply your first status, and Sonic is an element that applies super easy for Spider-Man by doing some web pulls on the boss. By holding your heavy attack button fully applies the Sonic status. The web pull is fast and you can do it from the air or the ground, making it perfect. Please keep in mind your intensity stat does affect this, and having 0 could mean it takes more than 2. Thankfully one of our pieces later on always rolls with intensity, so having 0 is basically impossible if you follow this build to the letter. Next, we have the PS5. I know people will complain about the most, but it's touch-in surge gear that comes with a damage buff. At the time of this video, we have the Red Room event on. That is the best way to farm this gear, but for when this event is over, farming Monica or the OLT. If you are a more casual player and mostly play in team, you don't really need this to still have good damage. This build is designed to kill the Adaptoid in 30 seconds. Unfortunately there is a cost to that, and unfortunately his piece. Is it? Even my roll isn't perfect. I would rather have targeted so it activated on critical hits, but I only really use this build for bosses and I have no problem hitting headshots to activate my damage buff. Also, having the status on your web shooters and not your ranged power attacks is super important, so you can battery with your regular web shooters is super important. The status also needs to be the opposite of your melee slot. I wish everyone luck if you decide to go for this. However, the next 2 pieces are super easy to farm and come with set stats, so you can get these super easy. First is the Public Menace emblem. I have already said how good this piece is in previous videos, but for anyone that missed them, the main reason we are using this is for the Spider Drone Conning perk. This will let the drone deal damage based on what element you have in your ranged slot. In this build it's cosmic, When you combine that with the high emissions per car drone will hit for some huge battery damage. I can't stress how important using high emissions is for our damage output. You need to use it. The damage the drone is dealing is actually hard to calculate and makes Spider-Man a definite dark horse for the raid and OLT. The drone actually shoots more than one target at once. It can actually shoot 3 targets at the same time, like you can see on screen right now. So, in fights like the OLT or the raid boss, the drone will be hitting all targets at the same time, so the total damage is hard to see, but it is huge and actually, in my opinion, makes Spider-Man MVP for the OLT and raid boss, which is hilarious to me because of the amount of people calling him useless, and now he could end up being one of the best. Let me break down some interesting maths for you. You can also see the drone shoots around every second as long as it has a target. So with that in mind, let's break some of these numbers down. You can see here in the big mess of damage numbers the drone is hitting for 150k around every second. The only way I can explain this is to whip out the crayons and show you this infographic. So let me explain this, and remember, this is just in theory and is not actually what is happening, but it gives you a good idea theoretically of how much damage the drone is capable of. Keyword here is theory and Avengers is so RNG, and your mileage may vary. These numbers are with a power 154 build with my specific stats. I will probably do this again when I get to the new 175 power cap. The drone lasts for 40 seconds. It's usually 30, but you will see why it's 40 in a second. So, let's keep it simple and round down the damage so it's 150,000, and then let's say hypothetically you could keep activating the damage buff and touch in surge buff the whole time and keep the status up the whole time. Keeping the status up for 40 seconds would be harder solo but super easy in a team. Wrecking Ball also lasts 30 seconds and can go past 40 by killing turrets, clones and mobs. So just the damage buff and touch in surge. Against bosses, when you are dealing battery damage, you will be able to activate your damage buff and touch in surge almost immediately after it ends. So you wouldn't keep it active for the whole 40 seconds, but you could get pretty close. So to keep it simple, and let's just say you could keep it up for 40 seconds. That would make 150,000 damage per second for 40 seconds would be 6 million damage against a single target. And remember, this build still is not power 160 or 175 yet. Again, we are just talking theoretically based on my stats and gear. Then if we also take into account the drone can shoot more than one target, so in the Super Adaptoid or Klaw it could be shooting the clones and other general mobs, the drone could theoretically deal almost 18 million damage over 40 seconds. Obviously, most mobs have nowhere close to that much health, but you get my point. While Spider-Man can't deal huge burst damage like Thor or Hawkeye, his potential for damage over a 40-second period with 3 enemies to shoot at is honestly off the scale. Even if you think this sounds crazy and not a realistic scenario, let's use a very possible real one. Even if we are talking about the very minimum time our buffs stay active, which is 10 seconds on the touch-in surge, that would still be 1.5 million damage for the duration of a single touch-in surge buff. When we are talking about these numbers, I want to remind everyone we are just talking about the drone and not the web shooters, which are dealing a respectable amount of damage by themselves. Hopefully this explains where the damage is coming from and why the public menace piece is so important. You take away the potential for status and battery damage and you lose a huge amount of damage. Just to add a bit more validity to this, working out a while ago I worked out the Super Adaptoid has an estimated 10 million health. Don't get me wrong, I understand what a bad way of working this out probably is, and it might not be correct, but I think I can safely say the Super Adaptoid has somewhere between 8 million at the very minimum and maybe 12 at the maximum at a safe bet based on the infographic you can see on your screen right now. So, let's call it an estimated 10 million. If we divide that by our 32-second Spider-Man kill, that would mean we are dealing 312,500 damage per second, which with the 150,000 drone damage and our web shooter shots, that sounds about right. We can probably fire 3 shots per second, so that all adds up in theory. If you don't like maths, I am super sorry for this part, but I thought it was super fascinating and worth mentioning. This also totally adds up with this screenshot of our damage from earlier. There is two 150,000 damage numbers because one is lingering from an earlier shot, so if we look just where the arrows are pointing, we have the 150,000 drone shot and what looks like 3 shots close to 50,000, totally matching what our damage per second should be. I am sorry I didn't explain this great. I tried my best, but what all this ends up meaning is Spider-Man can deal huge damage to multiple targets. You can get the Public Menace piece from the last Avengers standing mission, however you can get the legendary version I am using from completing vaults. I will leave a link to a Tony Bing video that shows you where to get all Spider-Man gear in the description. So now you know all that, you will understand why I am using this last slot, the spectacular lenses. It is mainly for the extra 10 seconds on the drone. While people may think using something that gives you an extra 30-something% critical damage may be better, as we just discussed, an extra 10 seconds of drone damage is huge and much better compared to any extra crit damage we may get. It also comes with precision and valor and an extra charge for wear bomb, which can be nice even if it's just for the extra iframes when throwing it and pausing your buffs. You can get this from Elite Hives. The ISOs are nothing special, triple precision and triple valor. I would love a Cosmic Surge precision and valor ISO here, so I will be farming for that to improve the build. Finally, we are using the Nordstone. Simple reason, we deal more damage with it, end of story. Some of you may have noticed I left the Nordstone out of the calculations from earlier because if you watch the OLT video back, it ends before Tachin Surge activates, so with some good perk RNG this could have actually been faster than 32 seconds. And remember, this build is just power 154. Be sure to subscribe to see the 175 OLT solo when I get there. I would also want to warn people to be careful of people posting gameplay without showing their power level, as there is a lot of people posting OLT takedowns with crazy damage without showing people they are 175 power. So this is just a PSA. The damage difference between a 175 power character and a 154 is huge, so don't get fooled by all the clickbaiters out there. For the skill tree, most the perks are not really doing anything for this boss build, but some important ones to point out are perks such as high emissions we mentioned earlier. It will give your drone a huge damage boost. You can pair this with either Class Clown, which can draw the boss's attention to the drone, or Special Delivery, which can let heroic orbs drop from turrets or mobs in the boss fight. You can use whatever you like for the other two heroics and most the mastery tree. The only thing to point out is Sharpshooter in the mastery tree for an extra 30% boss damage. I find this offers better burst DPS compared to having the extra 10 shots. The rest of the skill tree isn't important, so I won't waste any more time going over it. For the rest of the skills, you can use whatever you want. For all you ranged haters, I bring some sort of good news. When you reach power 175 melee against the Super Adaptoid and the normal version of the Klaw raid boss is actually usable and good. Solo kills are possible at a similar time to this ranged build, even if it is 21 power levels higher. So, stay subscribed to see that coming soon. I will leave you with a clip of me and some friends one phasing the Klaw boss on the Elite raid with me using this build against Elite Klaw. Be aware, in this clip the build is a higher power level but is against the Elite version of Klaw, hence why the damage numbers look smaller. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to see how this build gets better at higher power levels and possible boss melee builds coming soon.
Wakanda 10,000. Klaw, 0.
I do not think the gods are keeping score.
Perhaps they should.